Alright, welcome back my friends to the steaming mess that is the qualification paths to the Candidates 2024. A lot has happened over the last few days, none other than Gukesh winning the Chennai Masters 2023, thus overtaking Anishgiri in the FIDE circuit. Now if we flip to the other side of the coin, we've got Alireza Firouzja is partway through and has now finished a 6-game tournament against some sort of older veteran 2500 strength grandmasters, in which he needs to finish on 6 out of 6 to overtake Wesley So, and he will then presumably qualify via the rating spot. As it stands, Firouzja is on 4 out of 4, so resounding success thus far despite various controversies, and he now has 2 games to play against Sergey Fedorchuk, and this is the first one. Starts out with e4, we get a combative Sicilian obviously from Firouzja. There is no other option. If he draws, he loses like around 2.5 rating points I think, and the margin between him and Wesley currently is that of maybe a point and a bit. It is really fine. So Fedorchuk steps back, plays g3, and we get some combative notions from Firouzja, lashing out with b5. It'll be interesting to see how he fares with the black pieces. Both sides fianchetto. Firouzja brings a rook to c8, and then Fedorchuk himself lashes out with a4, because of course he could just sit back and do nothing. But it only works for so long. You need to create counterplay of your own, you need to have your own ambitions. We have an exchange in the centre, queen takes, and now an interesting b4 from Firouzja. Computer kind of refutes it. It's not immediately clear why, and it's not really worth delving into. Gives now bishop f1, undeveloping the bishop, presumably hitting this weakness. Natural response is a5, and then I suppose you get a nice outpost square here on b5. Or rather an immediate bishop a6. Rook c2, and then bishop c4, trapping the rook out. Oh god, that's filth. Okay, anyway, we don't get that. Instead we just get castles. Now a5, c3, takes, and h4 from Firouzja. As all good grandmasters do, h4 we see. c4 now from Fedorchuk. He's going to try and break this structure open. Castles. Slide a rook across. Bring the bishop across. We have an exchange. And now Fedorchuk just takes the pawn. Pretty natural move. Now, does Firouzja just take back here? No, of course not. Why would he do that? So temporarily Fedorchuk is up a pawn, but we see the knight jump in, gh4, queen centralizes, and now the rook comes into b5, which proves to be quite an important theme later in the game. Hits the queen out, queen moves, knight e6, maybe trying to put this queen in a little bit of a box. The knight would guard the rooks here. These escape squares are now covered. Just a possible idea, although unlikely. Rook d5, rook e8, now queen a3 from Fedorchuk. He's up 2 pawns, but the computer wants to profess that there's some advantage to be had here for black. Maybe, but it's hard to see where the practical chances are. Okay, he takes one pawn back, which isn't the most accurate move, but it's most definitely the sensible one. Queen slide across, rook c1, drop a rook back, and rook c2, loading up pressure on this f2 pawn. And suddenly from what was quite a straightforward position 5 moves ago, we now cut ourselves into Firouzja really mounting up some good pressure. So we see rook a b1, rook ec8 from Firouzja, not the most critical response. We would have liked to have seen queen f6, but again, that's quite tough to see when there's not an immediate payout. Doubling up the rooks makes sense. Queens come off, knight jumps in, and then we see rook b5 again. Now it may not become immediately clear why that's a mistake, or some of you may just be wincing at the sight of it. The idea is obviously simple. Guard this, Firouzja has to defend the pawn very passively. Good chess to be played. This is also hanging. The rooks can infiltrate. You're not so worried about this exchange because the bishop is a poor piece right now anyway, stuck behind the c4 pawn. But in typical instructive beginner fashion, it's important here to look for checks, captures, and then attacks. So let's look at the checks. There's knight h3. Well, that's shite, obviously. There's knight e2, which forces the king to move to any one of these squares. Maybe you just try and bring yourself close to the knight, perhaps. Then what happens after knight c3? That rook is hit. That rook is hit. There's still a good amount of pawns on the board, especially these. These are just awful. Fedorchuk just blunders a 2-move combination which loses him in exchange. We see knight e2, he opts for king h2, and Firouzja just jumps in. He says, why not? Fedorchuk guarding his pawn. The rook falls off. You lose another pawn. And this is just coming in. What can you do to stop this from happening? King g3, rook b2, we take. Fedorchuk resigns the game after that check. There's simply nothing to be done. This pawn will fall, whether it be rook b3 is probably the most sensible option after the fact. Let's say after the king moves, well, even if you come here, this is even stronger. King g3, you lose the bishop, you lose the game. Just a 2-move combination with 5 minutes on the clock. Granted, they're on move 32, okay, he's got to keep the tempo up, he's got to keep the ball rolling. But I mean, that's just insane, surely. I mean, I don't know. I certainly have no first-hand experience of Grandmaster level chess, but that... I mean, that's just bizarre. So, with that, Alireza Firouzja is on 5 out of 5. He has 1 game left with the white pieces against Fedorchuk. And he has, as it stands, overtaken Wesley So on the live rating list by 1 elo point. Assuming no other classical games take place from now until New Year's Day, Alireza Firouzja will be going to the candidates, not Wesley So. So obviously this sparks sort of a debate into, well, does Firouzja just withdraw now? Does he not play the final game? cite some illness or get Fedorchuk to do the same for you. Happy days, he's qualified. I think that would probably raise too many suspicions, and that is why I do have another game to show you. But Firouzja does not have enough of a buffer over Wesley to just, quickly draw this game and get himself out of there. It's another must win. Why they arranged it in this way in the first place, truth be told, I'm not sure. They could have just made it a 5 out of 5 tournament, maybe had 5 different players, because then you could give Firouzja 3 whites, 2 blacks. I don't know. Regardless, he now has the white pieces, has the open end a little bit more in his control, but Fedorchuk is not looking to just idly stand down. He's come to play fighting chess, opens up with a Sicilian. We get quite an open version. Knights fall off early, and queens fall off early. Now, did Firouzja have to allow this? Yeah, probably. His queen's in a bit of a box. Fedorchuk crashes through with b4. Take. Bishop d4. And here we see f3. Solidifying, making a little wall against this bishop. But if you look at the pawn structure, I mean, just look how solid this is. 5 pawns all in one big cluster. You're going to castle. Your king is always going to be around these. There's no queens to exploit any weaknesses. So how does Firouzja break through? He has to win. You see bishop c6 now from Fedorchuk. The rook slides out of the way of the pin. Castles. Bishop e5. Not damaging the structure, because although it may look pretty good in principle, this pawn cluster is actually quite useful for expansions. The more trades, the happier Fedorchuk is, really. King can slide across and open up on this weakness. With no queens, why not having the bishop pair? This king is safe, really. It doesn't mean anything that there's that structural damage in this instance. So the rook slides across to this file. Granted, there's 1, 2, 3 pieces in the way, but the king is at the end of the tunnel. Knight hits the bishop, bishop slides back, looking for a trade. b3 now, we get the trade, and the king climbs in. There are a few options. You could double up, but to what avail? You're never winning this pawn. In spite of that, Firouzja just doubles anyway, because what do I know? a5 now, king b2, seemingly sending the proverbial lamb to the slaughter. Rook c7, knight comes across, and a4 now, the whole point of playing a5. Firouzja chooses not to engage with the pawn at all. We take, and now all hope that Firouzja has of winning this game rests in that pawn. He's got to bring these rooks across. He's got to make use of the pin when the knight isn't there, of course. And you've got to try and capture that pawn. Should Fedorchuk be successful in that, then the game is going nowhere. If anything, it's the one who is better in this is Fedorchuk himself. Firouzja needs to march on forward, make a queen, deliver a checkmate over here. Jobs are good and welcome to the candidates. Fedorchuk does, as mentioned, gets his rooks ready for the attack. Hits that weak pawn. Rook e1 now defending from Firouzja. Knight comes across. f4. Knight a8. Bishop drops back. Knight comes forward. Notice the knight just ready to attack these squares at a moment's notice while this pin is still alive. We're on move 32 now. Firouzja only has 2 minutes left to make the rest of his moves and somehow has to win this position. Knight d5, knight a2, h6, h4, rook ba7, very clear threat. Bishop b1 guarding rather than just moving the knight, because the knight has nowhere to go. Rook slides back across, bishop d3, rook slides back across, no repetition of moves, of course. Firouzja just quite happy to burn time, really. Firouzja very low on the clock, Firouzja slightly less so. f5 now, Firouzja desperate attempts to try and crash open. The knight jumps in, Firouzja just ignores the attack. Ladies and gentlemen, Firouzja's hopes are dwindling. Firouzja is better in this position. Rook d5, slightly inaccurate, but Firouzja does not play the critical response. Firouzja is just happy to sit and do nothing. gf6 takes. That pawn's going nowhere. You can't get to this weakness to allow your pawn to promote. g5. I mean, this is ambitious stuff from Firouzja. He's seemingly so close. But rook b8, and the whole thing is covered. Knight c6, bishop c2, e5. And this is just too little too late from Alireza now. The draw obviously no good to him. He's trying to create chances for himself. Knight d4 plants a gorgeous piece on this outpost. Occupies some very critical squares. All this pressure mounting up on the pawn, as was mentioned. Alireza plays rook h3 and they agree a draw. Just to add context, I believe Alireza was the one who offered the draw. Knowing that the position is bordering on hopeless, Firouzja takes it. You could argue that Firouzja should have even just gone on. There's so many moves still at his disposal. I mean, knight c2, king c2. You're just holding on by a thread here. That pawn will fall. But okay. Firouzja, as I believe, offers the draw. Firouzja accepts. And that is it. Alireza Firouzja fails with white at the final hurdle. Firouzja cock blocks him from the candidates. I mean, I just can't believe it. That tournament has just been constructed completely in vain now. The whole thing has gone down the drain. Wesley So is now a point ahead of Firouzja. And there's no more days left. I mean, today is December the 22nd. We have the 23rd, which is quite literally tomorrow. The 24th is Boxing Day. The 25th is Christmas Day. Oh. No. The 24th is Christmas Eve. 25th is Christmas Day. 26th is Boxing Day. Not only is it Boxing Day, it's the start of the World Rapid and Blitz, which I'm unsure yet if Firouzja is attending. I believe he would. So unless there's a game he can play, maybe a 2-game mini match that he tries to win against the 2600, he can maybe win 1.5 half. It's like, I don't know, Lauren Fresnay or someone like that from his home country. There's nothing that can be done, really. So, as it stands, Wesley So is going to the candidates. If Firouzja decides to play any more games, I mean, Wesley isn't going to the World Rapid and Blitz, so it certainly opens up a can of worms. Does Wesley then go and farm rating against some 2500s himself? Or does he assess that as too much risk? I don't know. All we can report on is the facts, which is as it stands. Wesley So will be in the candidates by the rating spot, not Alireza Firouzja. So, okay, I don't mind Wesley So. He liked one of my tweets the other day, so go me, I guess. But thank you all for watching, guys. I will provide updates on anything that happens the next few days. Have a good Christmas.